Now, I know that many of you are feeling happy about the work the Trump administration has been doing so far. I can understand that. They've accomplished some great things. They've rendered the lies of the news media as irrelevant as the maunderings of a mentally deranged man wandering the sidewalk, shouting his paranoid delusions into the empty air until suddenly you think to yourself, oh, hey, look, that's Brian Stelter. They've protected girls from hulking predators who think they're women instead of what they are, which is hulking predators who think they're women instead of what they are. They've begun to ferret out government waste and fraud, causing Democrats to pour into the streets crying, give us back our waste and fraud, which is even funnier to watch than that time Joe Biden fell down a flight of stairs and the news media told us this was the best and sharpest Joe Biden ever, which might have actually been true, which is part of what made it so funny, but still not as funny as watching Democrats protest the end of waste and fraud. And just in general, the Trump administration has fought back against the vast leftist conspiracy to dismantle Western freedoms, so leftists can get back to doing fun leftist things, like in the 60s when they sang rock songs and used drugs and celebrated free sex until they realized, oh no, we're in the Manson cult. Those were the good old days for leftists. And yes, many of Trump's actions have made ordinary Americans watch the news at night and then dance around their bedrooms in their underwear, as if they were in some Chippendale revival of Riverdance, or an underwear version of a big Broadway musical production number where everyone forms a kick line and sings about the brotherhood of man until your wife tells you to knock it off and come to bed before you wake up the kids, and anyway, you look like an idiot. But still, even in these moments of celebration, it's important we note the times when the administration oversteps its mandate and does something we can't approve of, like the other day when Vice President J.D. Vance gave a mean speech in Munich and made the Germans cry. That's not nice. After all, the Germans are our allies when they're not trying to lay waste to human civilization, and here J.D. Vance was hectoring them about how they should stop censoring speech and stop threatening to annul elections, and stop letting millions of Islamists into their country to do jobs Germans have historically been able to do for themselves, like hating Jews and people. And after the vice president's speech, the German chair of the conference, Adolf von Schmendrick or whatever his name was. I didn't check because I thought we'd gotten rid of the Germans already, but apparently they're back for some reason. Anyway, this Adolf von Schmendrick guy got up to speak and started choking back tears and saying it just wasn't fair the way America kept getting in Germany's way every time Germany started to work up a really good head of steam. Between snuffles and sniffles and occasional sneezels and even a quiet boo-hoo-hoo, Chairman von Schmendrick said, quote, in World War I, Americans ruined our brilliant plan to wage trench warfare over 15 feet of lifeless French mud for the rest of history. In World War II, Americans reduced our nation to rubble after we had raised it to the very heights of barbarism. And now, when we finally figure out how to destroy Europe without firing a shot, you turn up again and lecture us about Western values like free speech. Let me remind you, it was the German people of the 1920s who used hate speech laws to shut down Nazi rhetoric and prevent Hitler from making appearances. And that worked out great. Unquote. So, remember, my fellow Americans, as happy as we may be with the Trump administration's efforts to restore American greatness, we must always maintain a concerned, worried expression on our faces when we think of our sad European allies while we're river dancing in our underwear. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show. All right, we are back laughing our way through this.
We're going to win so much. We're going to win at every level. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. We're going to win economically. We're going to win with the economy. We're going to win with military. We're going to win with healthcare and for our veterans. We're going to win with every single facet.
Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-yay. My, oh my, what a wonderful day.
We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning. Yay! You'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore.
I feel pretty, oh so pretty. I feel pretty and witty and gay.
We have to keep winning. We have to win more. We're going to win more.
I can't understand what we're laughing about. Leave a comment wherever you get the show. If you get it on DailyWire Plus, where you should get it, or if you get it on, YouTube or some other lesser place, leave a comment. And if that comment violates the laws of God and man and just disgusts everybody with your racism, your sexism, your just bigotry and hatred and that usual conservative cruelty that you exhibit, we'll read it on the show because that's what we're doing here. Today's comment comes from Wendy or Kia, it looks like, 4034, says, "We're on to you, Klavan, so don't ever make us wait that long for the Trump happiness montage again." I pushed it to the end of the show last time because it was my way of just pushing it out of the show completely because we're done with it and we're not going to play it anymore at all. So we just want to get right to today's episode, Trump Gets Real. And Chapter 1, 3 cheers, many tears. I know when you look at me, you think, how can I become a godlike figure of a man like that man there? And a lot of it has to do with taking care of yourself. Balance of nature, fruits and veggies. It's the most convenient way to get whole fruits and vegetables daily, especially if you're focused on being you only have to look to see what you want to be. Nature's good at giving us the nutrients we need through our fruits and vegetables. So Balance of Nature takes fruits and vegetables, freeze dries them, turns them into a powder, and then puts them into a capsule. You, or even I, take fruit and veggie capsules every day, and your body knows what to do with them. Balance of Nature is just one ingredient of a balanced lifestyle and has no intention of replacing a healthy diet, exercise, sleep, or any other healthy habits. It's intended to be used in concert with other healthy habits. That's the way I use it. I exercise. I actually just look at myself in the mirror and wonder at the beauty of what I see. But also I take Balance of Nature fruits and veggies. Go to balanceofnature.com and use promo code Klavan for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer. Plus, get a free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Klavan. How do you spell that godlike individual? It's Klavan. So this has been a week of incredibly good news, I think, by which I obviously don't mean the news you read or watch in the news media, but the things that are actually happening. Kash Patel was confirmed as FBI head. And as I've said before, the way the FBI is right now, I would have been happy if Trump had just nominated a stick of dynamite and painted a mustache on it and put a hat on his head and just thrown it into the FBI. But Kash Patel is close enough. But that really means that Trump has run the table on his appointments, except for the Matt Gaetz glitch. And this time that means that hopefully, first of all, it just shows the difference between this and the first administration when he basically was taken over by the rhinos of the RNC and they just plotted against him and worked to get in his way. They thought that their job was to hold him back and keep him from violating the norms and standards, which is what we elected him to do, to violate the norms and standards, which now stink because they're not American norms and standards at all, but they're this kind of modern leftist, elitist, globalist, norms and standards that we don't want, that don't belong here. So this time he's obviously doing a better job. He's got all his people in. Doge continues to cause good havoc, led by crazy Elon. And these are all things that, again, that mean that we're going to get the real Trump administration. We're going to see what it is. We're going to see what Trump wants to do. And while the news media continues to tell us it's going to be an absolute disaster, we'll get to judge for ourselves with maybe things we like, things we don't like, we don't know. But it's going to be better than what we've had, obviously, since Obama. And so those are the things that are making the news. But below the sight line, there has been this titanic, absolutely delightful, wonderful effort to pull the weeds of the deep state out of the government, to free the government again, to make it what it is. It's actually repealing FDR. Ever since FDR, the growth of government, this is like a century now, has been going on, and it's been getting kind of this massive unrolling where, we have these Congress creating these institutions and agencies that then aren't part of any branch, that are not controllable by any branch. And the Supreme Court sort of saying, okay, well, if that's what it is, we're going to have to do whatever these agencies tell us to do. And now we've got this permanent deep state that is working for what? It's working for the deep state. That's what you expect it to work for, because it doesn't have to get elected. So it's not working for the people. They sit there and go like, the president comes and goes, but we're the permanent government. So this is 100 years of strangling regulation. And he's trying to undo this for the first time since FDR. Reagan said, this was his big failure, that he didn't do it. And a federal judge has ruled that, yes, he can in fact fire federal workers, despite the unions whining about it. 6,000 IRS agents are thrown out the door. This is good stuff. This is really this kind of stuff we want to see. Kim Strassel, who I love, is at the Wall Street Journal, writes a great column this morning about these executive orders. Trump has put these executive orders demanding that agency heads now have to submit lists of regulations that exceed the Constitution to the president, and regulatory agencies have to submit to the executive branch their regulations for review. This is huge. I mean, it's an immense thing that we're not hearing anything about. We're hearing all the panic about this or that, whatever is the going thing, whatever, comes out of Trump's mouth that upsets everybody. And the thing is, this is going to bring a lot of lawsuits. Trump knows it. He means to do it. And what he thinks is that if he gets these to the Supreme Court, which he will, the Supreme Court is now the sort of constitutional court that will reverse this kowtowing to unelected agencies, this basically submission to the deep state. And he thinks that this will mean that he will free the executive to act like an executive, to take the executive branch and say, I want this, but not this. I'm not going to do this. And so this is important. And what Kim Strassel notes in this is she says, note that what Mr. Trump is doing, and this is the Wall Street Journal, so they're no big Trump fans, and Strassel is perfectly willing to tear Trump apart. These are people who actually are looking at the principle of the thing. Sometimes I disagree with their principles, but that's okay. At least I know that they're not, just worshiping some human being. She says, note that what Mr. Trump is doing is very different than Barack Obama's practice of ignoring inconvenient law, which always drove me crazy because it makes him a king. If the legislature passes a law and he says, I'm not enforcing that law, I'm not going to execute that law, he's just the king. Joe Biden, she says, had a habit of searching through dusty statutes to find some contorted rationale for a new exercise of power. This administration hopes its actions will compel the judiciary to re-examine the constitutional underpinnings of today's heaving federal infrastructure. In other words, Trump is obeying the law to get back to the Constitution, while the people who played king and destroyed the Constitution accuse him of playing king and destroying the Constitution. And all of this is very beautiful stuff. So this week, lots of good news. But in the midst of this good news, there were grim scenes in Gaza, and I have to mention these. I know it's a bring down for one thing, but it was evil on display. I mean, you couldn't read it without tearing up as I was looking at it in the newspaper instead of, thank heavens, on a screen. And your heart breaks. These evil monsters of Hamas, who are Iran. Let's never forget that we're fighting Iran. Iran has Hamas, and they have Hezbollah. And these are the people who represent them. Returned. Thank you very much. Some of the bodies of the hostages that they took from Israel, including these are dead hostages, including this beautiful young mother and her two little toddlers who were kidnapped and held in tunnels in this horrible captivity. Their name was Shiri Bibas, was the mother, and her two sons, Ariel and Kafir, who were 4 years old and 9 months old when they were kidnapped. And this said in the news story, their capture became symbolic of the horrors of the Hamas-led attack, and people were hoping against hope that they would return alive, but they did not. And the coffins were placed on stage before cheering spectators, Gazans cheering for their deaths, and cameras that broadcast the scenes on Arab television channels. So they were bragging about it, basically, these innocents. And the International Committee of the Red Cross tried to shield them from view from the cameras by pulling their trucks up in front of them. And meanwhile, the terrorists were setting off bus explosions in Israel, continuing their reign of terror, even as they parade themselves and victims. And I would call these Hamas people animals, but animals don't do stuff like this. you have to be capable of angelic goodness. You have to be a human being capable of angelic goodness to stoop to this kind of satanic evil. And the reason I mention this at a time of good news here is because it's always in foreign policy where crap gets real. It's always across the sea, because, we see these useful idiots from the college students, protesting on behalf of these savages, these barbarians, these monsters. We see them protesting, these kids who've never really suffered or seen what it's like to live in a country like this, or a country where chaos rules on your border and where evil dwells on your border. They don't know what that means. They have no idea what that means. To them, evil is a microaggression that makes them feel bad because they didn't get their pronouns or whatever the hell is the going thing. But that's what they think evil is, when it's really this. So they pour out into the streets, going from the river to the sea. Palestine must be free, meaning there should be a genocide of the Israelis. And this is the same. Look, it was students who supported the rise of Nazism in Germany. It was students who led the massacres of the Cultural Revolution in Mao's China. Students are people who know nothing and think they know everything. Young people in general tend to act like that. But we've even seen celebrities, the actress Susan Sarandon, who said, while I gaped that the to death of Israeli women just didn't happen. I would have preferred, she said, yes, I support women to death. I would have preferred she had the honesty to say that instead of this just lie and say, oh no, it didn't happen, when we saw the killers broadcasting this, videotaping this and sending the videotapes home to brag about the fact that they had Israeli women to death. And Angelina Jolie said, oh yes, October 7th was an act of terror, but that doesn't justify war, which is exactly the opposite of the truth it does. And in various school districts across the country, our country, anti-Israeli propaganda is being doled out by leftist teachers' unions to children as young as in kindergarten. That's because they don't live in reality. Reality in America lives beyond the sea, okay? We haven't, for maybe almost 100 years, 80 years, we haven't lived in reality. We've been too strong, too safe, too far away. There have been no wars on our continent since the Civil War. We don't know what it is to live in the rest of the world. And so you can sit in your safe America surrounded by police who won't beat you up, won't take you into a back room and beat you silly, soldiers who will guard you even if you hate them and call them names and they'll still protect you, social services that will support you when you're in trouble or simply too big a jag-off to support yourself. And you can pretend you're a good person or have a good policy, even if it causes women to be to death out of sight, and children are massacred in a country that you've never seen and probably know jack squat about, but you've learned all about on X. And so now you're really wise in the ways of these things. And I can tell you, having lived in another country, until you live in that country, you don't really know anything about it. And this lie, this fantasy develops, and it doesn't just develop in stupid people like students. It develops in the State Department, where the people are brilliant but utterly wrong. This lie that they tell themselves that if we just treat people nicely, they will turn into us. We are the baseline of what people are like. We who have been so safe, so civilized so long that we can go to the opera because we've got tough guys standing on walls protecting us. And so we think we're civilized people. But no, we've just put that part of civilization that has to fight to defend us. We've put it a little bit out of sight while we do the things that we do. We build Silicon Valley and go to the opera and read books. And those are wonderful things. And that's why I'm always so thankful to our military and our police, for keeping us safe so we can have a civilization and keeping us safe in a way that obeys the law and is responsible to our elected civilian leaders. The thing is, it's a lie that if we treat people nicely, they'll turn into us, because other cultures aren't as good as ours and other ideas aren't as good as ours. And so we can lie to ourselves that this is just the way people are, but it's not. It's not. Western history, Christianity, democracy, Greece, Rome, all of that is fed into civilizations that make us who we are, and those things didn't happen in other places, and those places are worse. The people are just as sinful. We're just as sinful as they are individually, but as a culture, we are living in a better culture, and that's what I want to talk about. That's why foreign policy is the place where crap gets real, and that's what I want to talk about today. Now, some of you may need to get some sleep. I don't even know what that's like, but even I occasionally like to rest, to fall asleep. And if you have trouble falling asleep, you want to think about Beam's Dream Powder. It's a science-backed, healthy, hot cocoa for sleep. It's completely transformed my ability to go to sleep, because usually I don't even start, but at least this way I can fall asleep. Other sleep aids can cause next-day grogginess. I would never try that. But Dream contains a powerful all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin to help you fall asleep and stay asleep and wake up refreshed. Dream powder is also tested for high-quality efficacy and formulated to ease your body into rest, supporting all 4 stages of the sleep cycle to help you fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. And it's delicious. I mean, it really is. It tastes great. I'm talking about your sea salt caramel, your brownie batter, vanilla chai. Just saying the words makes me drool waiting to drink this great stuff. Each serving is only 15 calories with 0 sugar. Mix it with hot water or milk, and you've got yourself the most delicious bedtime drink that actually helps you sleep better. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, get up to 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/Klavan and use code Klavan at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/Klavan and use code Klavan for up to 40% off. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I know how to spell Beam, but please, oh please, tell me how to spell Klavan. It's Klavan. No E's. I just make it look this easy. Chapter 2, Munich. Now, I mentioned, obviously, J.D. Vance's speech in the opening, and I mentioned it last week. But I haven't really had a chance to talk about it. And I know it's a violation of entertainment law, federal entertainment law, to talk about anything that happened more than 10 minutes ago, because we're supposed to just forget, the news is supposed to come into our minds, and then we just move on and go on to the next thing. But I was astounded by that speech, and I was astounded by the reaction to the speech. And I haven't heard people really reacting to, we're the frogs in the frying pan, the temperature of authoritarianism has been turned up so slowly and gradually in the West, really since FDR, that we haven't really realized just how bad this is. Now, some Republicans who are always at code 10, they're always at, oh my God, it's a panic and the republic is falling. They've been ahead of the curve in a way, but still they're not really hearing what happened. I really want to talk about this speech because it was a great speech. Maybe it's an even historic speech, but the thing that got me about it was so basic. It was so simple, so obvious. It was almost childish in its simplicity. And that's why the reaction to it was so stunning, that the right, on the right, the reactions range from, yeah, he punched those, Ponzi euros in the jaw, that kind of just anger without really consideration. And there was also on the right a lot in the intellectual right and the mid-right and the libertarian right, there was a lot of, he's betraying our allies when Russia is at the gate, and he's destroying NATO and he's destroying the post-World War II consensus and all this stuff. And, the left also had opinions, but who cares what they think? But still, that's an amazing thing for the right to kind of give this speech the kind of reviews instead of saying like, wow, let's stand back for a minute and talk about what we just heard. The journal Foreign Policy, which I think is a little bit to I don't know. It's pretty midway. I think they said that it's the speech that stunned Europe. And all I could think of is, if this stunned you, what the hell are you thinking? It was really what I thought through the whole thing. What the hell are people thinking when they're reacting to this speech? So let me just talk about this for a minute. This is a Munich conference with the EU in terms of security, which means, of course, American security and European security. And, JD got up and he started with gestures of friendship, and then he got down to it pretty quickly. Let's play that first clip too.
We gather at this conference, of course, to discuss security. And normally, we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values shared with the United States of America.
Now, I heard one very intelligent, moderate, I would call him culturally left, but libertarian right. I don't want to name him because I want to pick on him, and he's actually a pretty decent commentator, I think. But he was saying, well, yeah, there may be things happening in Europe that we don't like, but Russia, Russia's the real threat, because if they attack, if they come attack, that's game over. And of course, yeah, okay, if they attack, it's game over in the sense of it could be a nuclear war. But Russia's not attacking Germany. It's not attacking England. It's not attacking France. The stuff that Vance is talking about, and he didn't say this is the greatest threat. He said this is the threat that is concerning me. This is happening right now. And so I felt that everybody on the right, it's kind of like when a great play or movie comes out, something that really just rings the bell and is not just popular, but is a real classic. You'll often find that the first reviews are bad. You go back in time and look at some of the great classics, and you'll find people carping with it instead of saying, oh, wow, this is actually a great movie or book or something. It's interesting that I thought this was the way this speech was received. Why is he bothering these people? Why is he bothering our allies? Why is he attacking our friends instead of attacking our enemies? But listen to what he says now. He starts to talk about the fact that the people who won the Cold War, and this is just true, are taking on some of the behaviors of the losers, namely the communist slave states, the USSR and the states that they enslaved in Eastern Europe while they were enslaved, basically the USSR. Here's what he said. This is cut 3.
Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election. He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany, too. Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years, we've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard.
Now, remember what he said there. I mean, keep that in your mind. What he said is, are we on the same team here still? Because it is a question. Why are we defending? They can't live without us. They are protected by us. All their vaunted health care and their vaunted welfare state, they don't exist unless we defend them. Because if they have to spend the amount of money to defend themselves, all of that stuff goes away. All of that stuff disappears. I mean, I've tried to explain this to Europeans, but they say, no, you're not paying that much. Oh, yes, we are. And you're not. If you're not spending for a military, that's why you're free to do all this garbage. And say what you're protecting is a welfare state that is only there because of us. And what he's saying is, well, wait a minute, but don't we have to be on the same team? Now, the elections he was talking about in Romania, a guy named Klavan Klapbacks was elected, and they started to make that now usual leftist ploy about Russian interference, which was garbage. Russians weren't affecting the outcome of the election, and the court said the whole election, this is the first round of the election, had to be redone. And they call this guy a far-right nationalist extremist, conspiracy theorist, which often means just a regular guy. They should really stop the phrase far right, because they don't use it on the left when people are really far left. And in Germany, there's another right-wing party, the AfD, which has some suspicious people in it. So some people I don't like very much, but basically they are looking like they might win a majority, but they might win the most votes. But the mainstream parties are swearing they'll form a coalition against them to keep them out of power, which means that you can't even get a center-right party in Germany now, because the way that works is now you would have to link to this, what they call AfD, to this far-right party. And what is it that they do? What is it these people are mostly talking about? Mostly, they're talking about that they should stop letting all these migrants into the country, most of them Muslim men, into the country, where they attack women and they attack their values and they run over people, in the Christmas marts and all this stuff. And they, the people just keep saying, stop, and they can't do it. And I have to pause here because, of course, Biden was doing the same thing to our country and ask, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Because there are all these big theories. They're trying to replace the white people, or they're trying to import voters and all this stuff. And, I'm sure that some people are thinking that. I'm sure that they are. Maybe some radical leftist people are thinking that. But most people are not thinking that. I don't think most people in our country are saying open the border to get rid of the white people, or open the border because those people will vote for us. What I think that they're thinking, because most people think they're doing something really good, and they tell themselves that they're doing something really good. I think, and this is happening in England, election after election. No, we don't want to be part of, we want Brexit because we don't want so many people coming into our country. We want conservatives, the Tories in, because we don't want so many people coming into the country. And more people keep coming in. And you think, what are they thinking? In America, we're this great big multi-ethnic country. I love that about America. And I'm happy to have immigrants from different places. If we bring them in an orderly manner and make them assimilate to our ways, I'm fine with that. But this invasion force marching across our southern border, what the hell are they thinking? And I think that the answer must be that they are thinking that the nation state is past its day, that this is part of globalism, the next stage of the globalism that came magically into play after we destroyed the Nazis. And then, reluctantly, only because Reagan and Thatcher and the Pope made sure it happened, we destroyed the Soviet Union as well. So, nobody wants to answer the question out loud. Who runs this wonderful global, paradise that we're in? Who makes sure that it's not run by, let's say, the Iran? It's not run by people who just want to kill every Jew in sight or every Christian in sight. Why? Who's going to do that? And the idea is us, the elites, the Davos man is going to run it, and everything is going to be great. And they continue to believe that, even though COVID proved they have no freaking clue what the hell they're doing. They're a bunch of morons because they actually are just surrounded by people who agree with them. They have no idea that past the river's edge, past the ocean shore, the bad guys are out there and they want to destroy us. And the bad guys are big. They're China, they're Russia, they're Iran. They're all these little places that have little outshoots of all those philosophies or being run by those philosophies. They're not going to join in. And so then you have to capitulate to them like they do at the UN, and they put like some incredible, crazy Islamist in charge of the Human Rights Commission. And we're supposed to say, it's the United Nations, we have to respect them. No, the nation state is still the best vehicle for democracy because it's where you collect people who have the same ideas and the same culture. And by the way, this COVID thing, how I always tell you get tomorrow's news today here. And when the COVID thing happened, I said, look, this is a massive, massive failure by the elites. They think they're not going to pay for it. They're paying for it now. And the Atlantic magazine had an article saying Gen Z kids have reacted to COVID by declining trust in political and scientific authorities, anger about the excesses of feminism and social justice, and a preference for rightward politics. And by the way, it's not excesses of feminism and social justice. It's feminism and social justice that we are opposed to. It's like no shice, Sherlock. You failed, and we want somebody that succeeds. We want a philosophy that succeeds, which is what Vance went on to describe in Europe. He said, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they judged to be, quote, hateful content, or to this very country, he meant Germany, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online. He says, I look to Sweden, where the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Quran burning, saying that free speech is not a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief. And then he went on to say this about the UK, cut 4.
A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution.
Amazing. And he went on to mention that in Scotland, people have been warned that silently praying in their homes, if their homes are close to an abortion mill, could be illegal. Silently praying in your homes. And so Vance admits that the Biden administration was into this, censorship on the name of misinformation too. And the big question, I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, and people are criticizing this. This 60 Minutes did a whole show kind of lauding the Germans for these SWAT raids on people who oppose abortion or people who oppose feminism. They're lauding them. And Margaret Brennan, who is just an empty-headed idiot, said, Hitler rose because he weaponized free speech, which, as I said in my opening, was the exact opposite of the truth. There were plenty of laws outlawing speech like the Nazi speech and Hitler's speeches, plenty of laws. And that, of course, gave them more importance than they should have had. And my big question here is, when did these people decide, these governors decide that they were not responsible to the people they govern? That somehow that wasn't their job, that we don't matter, but the migrants do, that what we want doesn't matter. They're not here to do that. The problem with deciding that you know what's best. See, this is the global idea. The globalist idea is we know what's best because we're the elites. The problem with deciding that you know what's best is twofold. A, it isn't true. You don't know what's best. You proved it during COVID. And B, it means you have an excuse not to do the job that you are actually hired to do, like journalists who feel they're not responsible to the facts because they know what's best, so they have to get to the truth. Professors who feel that they're not responsible to the text that they're supposed to teach, the Constitution, the great literature, the Greeks, the Romans, all that. They don't have to teach that. They just teach their theories about how this violates what they know is best, feminism and transgenderism and all those things. That's what they teach. And they don't feel responsible to do the job because they have a higher calling. That means a world where there's no country, living in the John Lennon song, Imagine, everything's going to be great because they're going to be running it. The fact that Vance could list these atrocities against human rights, like telling people they can't pray in their house, and every single conservative of every stripe, and even people on the left, at least on the moderate left, did not raise up and say, damn right, why are we paying for their defense if they're not us? If they're not us, why are we paying for sending our soldiers, committing our soldiers to protect NATO if NATO is now filled with socialist clowns? Why are we doing this? And finally, he ended with this, and this is basically the last idea that I want to talk about. It's cut 5.
I've heard a lot already in my conversations, and I've had many, many great conversations with many people gathered here in this room. I've heard a lot about what you need to defend yourselves from, and of course that's important. But what has seemed a little bit less clear to me, and certainly I think to many of the citizens of Europe, is what exactly it is that you're defending yourselves for. What is the positive vision that animates this shared security compact that we all believe is so important? And I believe deeply that there is no security if you are afraid of the voices, the opinions, and the conscience that guide your very own people.
So everybody is saying, this threatens the post-World War II order. Well, first of all, World War II was 80 years ago, which is how long an idea lasts. That's how long any order lasts, a human lifetime. That is how long ideas last, especially bad ideas. They collapse after that because there's nothing supporting them except tradition. And people say, well, we want peace. We have to have peace. We have to keep these things together. But, you have peace in a schoolyard if you give the bully your lunch money. If you stand up for something, you're going to get a black eye. I've had a few black eyes and broken noses because, you don't say no. You don't say okay to the bully. You got to stand up. So what are we defending here? This is the thing this speech is so simple. It's childishly simple. And yet nobody stood up and said, this is the speech we need, except for the fact that it slapped the Euros around. We like to see them because we think they're gay and we like slapping them around. But that's not the point. The point is, what are we defending? Why are we paying to defend it? Listen, I lived in England for many, many years. I loved it there. I visited all the countries that he's talking about. I loved all of them. But if they're just museums of a way of life that no longer exists, let them go. I don't care about somebody else's territory if it's not supporting the West. I am in favor of a vibrant foreign policy, a vigorous foreign policy, and a vigorous defense policy if I'm defending the things that I believe in. If a man can be arrested for praying in his home, what do I care whether it's a Chinese cop or an English cop who arrests him? What the hell difference does it make to me? What is the argument for staying in this alliance if we are not fighting for the freedom we love? In today's fast-moving world, there's an urgent matter that often gets overlooked: mothers and their unborn babies who need our support right now. Across the country, PreBorn's network of clinics stands ready to help women facing difficult decisions about their pregnancies. When these women see their baby's heartbeat on an ultrasound screen, they are twice as likely to choose life. That heartbeat represents something powerful, a new life with endless potential. PreBorn connects with women in these crucial moments, offering them hope, support, and a chance to see the precious life growing inside them. Your monthly support of just $28 could help save lives and change futures. Think about this. That's less than $1 a day to help mothers and their babies get the care and support they need. One heartbeat today could touch countless lives tomorrow. If you're ready to make a difference, it's easy to help. Just dial pound 250 and say baby. That's pound 250 and say baby, or visit preborn.com/Klavan. Every donation goes directly to helping mothers choose life for their babies and themselves. Again, that's preborn.com/KLAVAN. Join us in supporting these families, because every heartbeat matters and every life has purpose. Chapter 3, Playing Chicken in Kiev. So this brings me to what Trump is up to in Kiev, in the Ukraine, and he's setting up talks with Putin. And the Europeans and the Ukrainians claim that he has left them out of it. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, says that is not true. They have been consulted and kept up to date, but obviously they haven't been invited to the talks in Saudi Arabia. And he's sniping at Zelensky in ways that are, look, Ukraine is a corrupt country. But they didn't start this war. And Trump at one point claimed that Zelensky or Ukraine started the war. And I don't know if he misspoke or not, because that's ridiculous. That's just an untruth. And he shouldn't say things like that. I have to say, we want to keep it clear what happened. And Zelensky is sniping back at him, which is always a bad thing to do with Trump. He doesn't like it, saying he's in a Russian disinformation space and Ukraine is not going to be involved in any deal. He claims that they came to him and pushed a paper saying, give us your precious mineral rights, sign this right now, and he wouldn't do it and all this stuff. So it's very unclear, and it's very unclear what Trump is after exactly, because he's always dealing, his mind is always on the move toward his goal and not necessarily the words that are coming out of his mouth at that moment, and the media is screaming about this. And, this is all, he's uniting with Putin because they're both authoritarians. And I want to say that my take on Ukraine has been very unpopular because it's realistic and true. And, that's not something people love. And it leaves no room for virtue signaling. And that's not something people love. And I have to say it to you, even though I get a lot of letters every time I mention it, because I'm on a mission from God, as you know. And, there are things on the right about this that are absurd. Forget this Putin is a good guy thing. I mean, forget that he's even a useful guy. He's a bad, bad man. He is a bad guy. He's a KGB torturer. And, you can say, oh, I love him, he's right-wing, he supports religion. If you disagreed with him, he would send 2 goons over to your house and throw you off a roof. Because you were a journalist or because you said something about him. You disappear, you go into prison, you die mysteriously in prison. He is a punk and a thug. And he always has been. And the Russian people love him because he makes them feel powerful after the humiliation of the fall of the Soviet Union, just like Hitler made Germany feel powerful after they lost World War I. So he's using that. I'm not saying he's a Hitlerian figure. He's not. But he is a tyrant, and he's a bad guy, and he did, violate the sovereignty of a foreign free country. So I'm not with the isolationists. I think that's silly. The world is too small not to stand up for threats. They say, why should I stand up for a threat far away? Because one day you open your door and the guy with the gun is right outside. It's a tiny, tiny world now. And, you have to take care of these things when you can. And I'm not with the neocons who still see America with the world's police, as the empire that we were after World War II. That's a fantasy. It's not true anymore. And fantasies do not work across the sea, because that's where crap gets real. So here's what I think Trump is doing. Trump is preparing America to become the empire it never quite was, but it is about to become. And that's going to be good and bad, but it is the next phase of who we are. And to do that, he has to retract our interests for a while, which is going to drive the neocons insane because they want us to protect every corner of the globe as if we were still this mighty, unstoppable nation. We're not. We're $36 trillion in debt. Our military is rotting away. China is outstripping us in shipbuilding to like the, measure of 300 to 1. They're going to own the ocean waves, which means, you think that's not important anymore, but it is. And we have to retract and regroup. This is what the Soviets did after the Russian Revolution, because after the revolution, they were weak, so they pulled back, and then they conquered the world after World War II. The French did it after the French Revolution because they were weak. They pulled back, and then Napoleon went out and conquered Europe. And I'm not saying we're going to conquer countries. I'm just saying before we act in an aggressive forward motion again, we're going to have to pull back. And I know that means that we're going to have to do things we don't like doing, And so the Ukraine war started because the Afghan retreat, Biden's Afghan retreat in chaos, inspired Putin. He realized, I'm dealing with this old guy who doesn't know where the hell he is or what he's doing, who's telling his military what to do, and just created absolute humiliating chaos in Afghanistan. And when the threat came on Ukrainian border, let's not forget that Biden said, well, a little incursion is not so bad. A little incursion of a morning is not so bad. And that gave Putin a pass. This war is not Trump's fault. He is right about this. It's easy for Trump to say that wouldn't have happened if I'd been president. It would not have happened if he had been president. He was right about that. And so why does Trump keep saying all these nice things about Putin and treating him like a decent guy? It's because he knows that Putin needs that. Putin needs that more than he needs Ukraine. And I don't mean just because he's a narcissist. I don't know what he is, but he's a dictator, and dictators have to look good to their people. So he knows that if he compliments him, that's a good thing. People are saying, Trump likes this guy and America can get along with him and is treating him with dignity. That's good for Putin. It also means if we pull it back, it's bad for Putin. He is actually negotiating when he does those things. And I do not think he thinks that Putin is a wonderful person. I don't think he's that stupid, even though Bush thought so, even Obama thought he was, tell Vlad everything's going to be fine with him all the way in secret. That was what Obama said. But no, I think Trump knows exactly who he's dealing with. I think he's dealt with people like this all the time for his whole life. And he's not having a bromance with him. He's basically, negotiating with him. But I think he gives Putin the legitimacy he needs in order to get concessions back. No matter who pulls out of this war, whether Biden had run again and won, whether, what's her name? I can't remember, had run and won, they still are going to give Putin some of the things that he has already won. He's not going to leave the Donbass, I don't think. They keep saying he's abandoning Ukraine, but what are the alternatives? It is to live in a forever war that we can no longer afford, or, see if we can establish peace there. It's not going to be nice. It's not going to be nice, but I've told you repeatedly that this is how it's going to go. I've repeatedly told you that this is what's going to happen in Ukraine. Now it's happening. We can't spend on it forever. A tolerable end would be a blessing. And this is what I think Trump is doing in the world where it gets real, which is over the sea. He is preparing America for a new greatness. But before we get there, we're going to have to pull back and get our house in order. If, like me, you own a handgun, you know the dilemma. You either keep it locked away somewhere secure but tough to get to, or you compromise on security for quick access. Neither option is ideal, and that's why I was genuinely impressed when I tried out the StopBox Pro. I've had mine for, about 6 months, and it solves that access versus security problem brilliantly. What makes it different is that it uses this incredibly clever push-button mechanical system. There's no keys to lose, no batteries to fail, just reliable access when you need it. What really sold me was testing it out at home. The build quality is exceptional, and it should be, since they make everything right here in the USA. I can access it quickly in the dark, which gives me real peace of mind, while simultaneously making whoever is breaking and entering learn what regret feels like very rapidly. Plus, for those of you who travel, it's TSA compliant, so you can actually fly with it properly secured in checked baggage, because it turns out TSA isn't a fan of just throwing loose weapons in your bag. Go figure. For a limited time only, our listeners are getting a crazy deal. Not only do you get 10% off your entire order when you use code Andrew Klavan at StopBoxUSA.com, but they are also giving you buy one, get one free for their StopBox Pro. That's 10% off and a free StopBox Pro when you use the code Andrew Klavan at StopBoxUSA.com. Discover a better way to balance security and readiness with StopBox. Final chapter, Gilligan's Island. So, as you know, I believe that the culture and the arts reveal the soul of the nation. And let me end with this, because I think I think that, as I've said repeatedly, this is a watershed moment. This is something that you will not see again, maybe even in your lifetime. Certainly we won't see it in my lifetime, because it's about, about 20, 30 minutes. But let me tell you a story. When I was in Hollywood, I was at Sony. I think I've told this story once before, but I was in a meeting at Sony with this lady executive, and she was sitting with it was in a ground floor office with a big window in back of her. And while we're chatting, it was just a meet and greet, as they call it. While we're chatting, I see a trailer out back, like a trailer home out back. And I see people coming up to it like it's a religious relic and touching it, kind of with this awe-inspiring and repeatedly taking pictures of it. And finally, in the middle of this meeting where, I'm looking for work, I said, what is happening out there? Why are they going? And she said, well, that is the trailer where Walter White from Breaking Bad made his meth. Remember, he had that trailer lab. And for those of you who never saw Breaking Bad, it's about a weak failure of a man who's a chemist. He's a chemist's teacher, and he finds himself and restores himself by becoming an evil drug kingpin. So he's a weakling, and then he becomes powerful, but he also becomes evil. And this was part of an artistic movement, an artistic moment. I'm always, for my sins, I'm always about 5 years ahead of the time, as it's always true of my entire career, which is, why I have to stand out in the street with my hat open saying, please give me money, because it's always before the public catches up with it. But in the 90s, I was writing anti-heroes. So I wrote true crime about a terrible guy who actually is the only guy who can solve the crime because he's not listening to political correctness, because I understood that a world that was wrapped in lies was going to need a basically bad guy. I invented Donald Trump essentially in a lab myself, but in true crime, where I said it's going to take a bad guy to see the truth if being nice means accepting lies. And so I had all these anti-heroes, and I realized that manhood was being outlawed by feminism, so only outlaws would be men, right? And so then one day I'm watching television in the 2000s, and I see the show The Shield, and I turned to my wife and I said, oh, now the idea has caught up and it's going to be on TV. And it was, there was The Shield, there was The Sopranos, there was Breaking Bad, and all these bad guys on TV. And so now, again, being a few years ahead of the time, I started writing the Cameron Winter mysteries, which are about a man who has been, he feels, a bad guy, an anti-hero, and wants to become a hero. And that's his journey through this series of books, because it's a transition. So now, Vince Gilligan, the creator of Breaking Bad, wins the WGA's big writing award. That's the Writer Guild of America, of which I'm a member. And he gets up and he makes a speech, and he says this, cut 11.
And Walter White is, because of the work they did, he's one of the all-time great bad guys. But all things being equal, I think I'd rather be celebrated for creating someone a bit more inspiring. In 2025, it's time to say that out loud, because we are living in an era where bad guys, the real-life kind, are running amok. Bad guys who make their own rules. Bad guys who, no matter what they tell you, are only out for themselves. Who am I talking about? Well, this is Hollywood, so guess.
So obviously it's Donald Trump. So now he sees that the product of his work has been the great evil, the satanic evil of Donald Trump. He's in Hollywood, so that's what he says. So what's the answer? How are we going to stop this horrible Donald Trumpian culture? He goes on, cut 12.
I have a proposal. It certainly won't fix everything, but maybe it's a start. I say we write more good guys. For decades, we've made the villains too sexy. I really think that. When we create characters as indelible as Michael Corleone, or Hannibal Lecter, or Darth Vader, or Tony Soprano, viewers everywhere, all around the world, they pay attention. They say, man, those dudes are badass. I want to be that cool. When that happens, fictional bad guys stop being the cautionary tales that they were intended to be. God help us, they become aspirational.
So we have to write more good guys. I agree with them. I think it is time for us to rediscover what it means to be a heroic man. See, here's the problem. There are plenty of shows about heroic firemen. They're on the networks all the time. Heroic FBI agents, heroic cops. They're on all the networks, but they're not creative and insightful, and they don't delve into the culture, at the heart of the culture, like shows like Breaking Bad did, right? These are shows that would not have gotten on TV if there hadn't been so many channels and they needed, offbeat content to fill their channels. That's why they got on. There are plenty of good guy stories on TV, but nobody cares about them culturally. The critics don't care about them culturally. Here's the thing. I've talked to a lot of people about Breaking Bad in Hollywood, and they all say the same thing. Well, he becomes a bad guy to save his family, to support his family. That's a lie. He becomes a bad guy because he's not a man, and he needs to become a man. On the first episode, his wife gives him a hand job as a birthday present. That is not a man. That is not a guy who's in charge of his life. He becomes a man by becoming a meth gangster. That is how he becomes a man. And he says, now I'm the guy they're afraid of. I'm the one who knocks on the door. But no one in Hollywood ever wanted to admit the show was about manhood. The thing that J.D. Vance was telling us and telling the Europeans was that you can't be a good guy in a bad society by protecting the society. You can only be, if you're a man and you're in an oppressive society, you can only be a renegade. And if you're arresting people for prayer, and if you're hating men for being manly, and if you denigrate and dismiss women for being feminine, for being mothers and homemakers and wives, the man is going to be an outlaw. He's going to be the Andrew Tate who dominates and domineers women. He's going to be the guy who holds up a liquor store and does not care what the police think, because the police are just as bad as he is. Leftist society is bad. It kills babies in the womb. That's bad. That is immoral. It is wrong. It is an atrocity. It hates women because why? Because women don't hold to the values of male culture. They are the other half of the culture. And that is something that only a free society can decide to respect and elevate. Leftism is racism because it uses race to divide us so it can sell us things that we don't want. It's authoritarian because it basically says the government can distribute wealth better than a free market, which is a lie. And when you give all your money to the government, you've given your life to the government, because your money is your time and your time is your life. The left and the right are both mad at JD, at our vice president, because he told an unbearable truth. A culture that denigrates the work of womanhood, that kills babies in the womb, that silences speech, that outlaws prayer, is a bad society, not a good one, and no good man can stand up in defense of it, even if he's putting out the fires that burn down your rich little houses. I've always told you the future is male. It goes where the young men go. That's just a truth of life. It's a truth of life because the young men, if you have a little boy and you have a little girl, the one who's going to jump off a cliff is the little boy almost every time. And whenever I say that, there always somebody says, oh, my little girl is this, or I don't care. Taken as a whole, the one who is going to build a chute that takes his skateboard to the moon and come home in a cast is the little boy. That's how you get to the future. You've got to be Elon Musk, a little nuts, to send a rocket to Mars. Right now, men are coming back. You want to talk about tomorrow's news today? This hasn't really reached the headlines yet. It hasn't even appeared in the statistics yet. I will put my money on it. They're coming back to church. They're coming back to marriage. Not enough to get reported on yet. The numbers will catch up with me, but they're coming back to the idea of manhood and the idea of heroism and nobility and self-restraint. It is happening as I'm sitting here talking to you, even if people are not talking about it, even if it's not showing up on the numbers. The culture has got to come with them. And the arts should show them the way, should show them what it means, because it's complicated. It's complicated to be a man, and it depends on women being women, because men and women are one flesh. It depends on women accepting the generosity and sacrifice and virtue of being womanly in order for men to take on the nobility and courage and sacrifice of being manly. Good men can't fight for bad cultures. If the culture does not come with this movement, Trump is part of this movement, but he only represents it. There's always, when a big new idea comes, like when a new form of acting comes to the arts, there's Marlon Brando who represents it. When new art comes to painting, there's Picasso who represents it. But those guys only represent a movement that is coming. This movement is coming, and Trump represents it, but the movement is coming. It's like a wave. It's coming organically. It includes worship of God. It includes the return to manhood. It includes the return to femininity. And it is coming, and the culture better come with it. The politics better come with it. And if it does, good men will fight for it. And if it doesn't, bad men will tear this culture down. You want to invent some good guys, you better think through what it is they're going to stand for. And that's what J.D. Vance was saying, and that's what I'm telling you too. The IRS is ramping up its enforcement efforts in 2025, and with April 15th approaching, time is running out. If you're facing back taxes or unfiled returns, delaying action only compounds the problem. Every day you wait makes your tax situation more difficult to resolve. Don't let another tax deadline pass you by. While taking immediate action is crucial, attempting to deal with the IRS alone can be a costly mistake. This is where Tax Network USA's expertise becomes invaluable. What sets them apart? Unlike other tax resolution firms, Tax Network USA maintains privileged access to the IRS through their preferred direct channels. This means they know exactly which agents can help resolve your case effectively. Whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, their team of attorneys and negotiators brings proven strategies to settle your tax issues favorably. With over $1 billion in tax debt already resolved, they have the experience and expertise to handle your situation. Talk with one of their strategists today. It's free. Stop the threatening letters, stop looking over your shoulder, and protect yourself from property seizures and bank levies. Don't let the IRS control your future. Call 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Klavan. April 15th is just around the corner. Act now before the IRS asks you how you spell Klavan. It's Klavan. You know what the best reason to become a Daily Wire Plus member is? You are directly supporting the fight. Every dollar goes right back into building a real alternative to the mainstream. More shows, more movies, more investigative journalism. This is how we continue to reshape the culture. And here's another reason. If you like this show, there's more of it waiting for you. Only Daily Wire Plus members get exclusive content at the end of every episode, the show after the show, plus live chats and more. Don't just listen, be a part of it. Download the Daily Wire Plus app or go to dailywire.com/subscribe and become a member today. All right, Klavan Klapbacks. If you weren't watching that was them dancing around in Walter White's fan. All right, from Rick. Hey, Andrew, I haven't been watching the show long, but I have come to find you very insightful. So obviously, this is from someone on drugs. I wanted to know your opinion on free will. I have been taught that God knows every choice you will ever make. However, that makes me question true free will. I think that possibly God limits his knowledge of our choices to knowing all possible choices and outcomes and guides us down the path he wants us to take. Thanks for all you do. God bless you, your family, and all at the Daily Wire. Well, thank you for that. My take on the question of free will, and I do understand it, is different than a lot of people's, as you won't be all that surprised to learn. God does not live in time. He lives in eternity, and eternity is not just time going on forever. It's not like just a line that goes out of sight. It is all time happening at once. We can't imagine that. We can understand it. We can understand, oh yeah, I get it. He's living in all time at once, but we can't really comprehend it because we're not God. This is one of the charming things about us, that we sometimes think we are, but we're not. So if you think about that for a minute, a lot of the things that we care about and we think about go away. So God is not in a place of causation. Causation depends on this happening and then that happening. That is how you can prove that something is causative. But God sees something entirely different. He sees everything happening all the time, all at once. And that, like I said, we don't understand what that is. We have no idea what that is. We do not know what he sees. And so our choices are entirely free because our choices happen in time, but he sees them all together. And so we don't have to worry about that. We only have to worry about ourselves. See, this is the big thing. A lot of theological questions go away when you realize that you are not God. A lot of theological paradoxes go away when you realize you are not God. You have no idea what he sees or what he thinks. You just have no idea. You know what he sees in a human way. And that's why we have Jesus Christ, because it says in the Bible, no one has seen God, but we have seen Jesus Christ, and we see God through him. That's the only way. We cannot see him as he is. I mean, in old myths, you catch fire if you see God as he really is, or you're just totally destroyed if you see God as he really is. But because it's impossible, you can't do it. So that solves the problem for you. You don't have to worry about what God is doing. You have to worry about what you're doing in light of the fact that there is a God and we see him through Jesus Christ. From Stephanie. Could you expand on your idea of freedom? In your recent show, you said you have to be free to make the wrong choice. How would you respond to someone who claims a right to abortion through her right to bodily autonomy? Is there a right to drug addiction, self-mutilation? They're really connected with the idea that God gives us freedom because without freedom, there is no love. I'm having trouble with the idea that there's a right to harm yourself or others. Thank you, Stephanie. It's funny. We did a backstage at CPAC, and Knowles was going on with this idea that you're free to do what you ought, which he says he got from Lord Acton, but I'm not sure he's reading Acton correctly, but maybe he is. But no, I mean, obviously, you're free to find the way to do what you ought. That is what freedom is for. It is to get you to do the right thing. What good is doing the right thing if you do it at gunpoint? What good is doing if somebody points a gun at your head and says, do the right thing, you get no virtue out of that. Just like if the IRS comes and takes your money and gives it to someone else, you are not giving charity. That is not the same thing as charity. So what you are free to do is you are free to fail, but that does not mean you're free to hurt other people. That's absurd, right? Obviously, your freedom ends at the other guy's nose. That is very standard wisdom about freedom. So no, you can't commit an abortion because that's another person. That's a whole other person with another life, another God-given personality, a DNA set, an entirely different person. It happens to be living in its mother's body, but that's what the relationship of a mother is. You're not just somebody who woke up hooked to a violinist on a kidney machine. You are a mother of that child, and you cannot kill it because it's not you. You have no right to do harm to other people. The question of whether you have the right to do harm to yourself is a complex one. And I would say that yes, to a certain extent, you do. You do have the right to drink too much. The minute you get behind the wheel of a car, you lose that right. And I think it's a shame that people do these things. And I think, but if you can't do that, is it a paradox? It's a puzzle. It's kind of complex. You have to be free to destroy yourself in order to be free to make yourself and find yourself and surrender yourself to God. That's the way it works. And, that's a tough thing to understand, but it is just true. So the government can step in and stop you from using a handheld cell phone while you're driving a car because that endangers me. But I don't actually think the government should be able to make you wear seatbelts. It may be able to make your child wear seatbelts, but I think you should be able to fly through the windshield if that's your want. But still, freedom is a complicated thing, but still you have to be free to do the wrong thing so that you can choose to do the right thing, which is different than saying you're just free to do what you should do. That's ridiculous. Klavan Klapbacks at DailyWire.com. We want to hear from you. Please write in Klavan with a K, Klapbacks with a K at DailyWire.com. You can ask questions about your personal life. You can talk about politics. You can ask me questions, whatever you want. We love to hear from you. Become a member today because at the end of Klavan Klapbacks, we plunge into a limitless darkness of Klavanlessness, a Klavanless darkness of limitlessness, whatever it is. I can't even remember. It's so dark that I can't even describe it to you using words. But that's what happens if you're not a member. If you are a member, you get to go to Member Block and you get another, who knows, maybe 10 minutes of life. So become a member today. Go to dailywire.com/subscribe and use code Klavan at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. If you haven't done that yet, so long. It's the Klavanless abyss for you. If you have done it, come to Member Block.